I was one of the lucky ones. I was a Melbourne supporter, so after my team I barracked for, and David Swartz was my hero.
St Kilda, and hero would be, I had two heroes, Robert Harvey and Ozzie Jones.
Fitzroy, and my heroes were Alistair Lynch and Paul Lewis from Fitzroy, and Wayne Carey.
Barracked for Collingwood, obviously with the family connection. Love watching Gavin Brown play, and also for some reason liked Warwick Kappa. Maybe the number 39 might suit into that, but yeah, love watching him play and his flair and his out there character as well.
Carlton, Anthony Koutoufides.
I went for the Sydney Swans. I grew up in Sydney, so Paul Kelly was my first footy hero.
Dad coached the Crows from 91 to 94, so really followed him.
Collingwood and Nathan Buckley.
Geelong Football Club and Gary Ablett Senior.
Who my hero? Probably Tony Modra, growing up in Adelaide when it was a one-team town back then, and had a little bit to do with him because I used to go to training and that sort of thing with Dad. Obviously the good looks, the girls loved him, he kicked goals every week, and he was the biggest thing that South Australian footy's ever seen.
Collingwood supporter as a kid, and I supported my fellow Italian, Big Sav Rocca.
Richmond Footy Club and Matthew Richardson.
Richmond, and I have to say Matthew Richardson.
Barracked for Richmond, and my heroes growing up, big posters on the wall, were Tony Lockett and Dermot Brereton.
I went for the West Coast Eagles, and I sort of fondly remember the 92-94 grand finals. So probably guys I really enjoyed watching were Peter Matera, especially in that 92 grand final, running down the wing and kicking goals, and probably the other one who played pretty similar to me was Dean Kemp.
Mad Hawthorn supporter, and John Platten was my favourite player, number 44, so pretty lucky to have his number on my back now.
Big Nathan Buckley fan, obviously Collingwood as well, so a couple of heartaches in the early 2000s.
I barracked for Hawthorn. My hero was Shane Crawford.
I was lucky enough to barrack for Hawthorn, and as all kids want to do, I wanted to be a forward, so it was Dunstall that was my hero back then.
I barracked for the Western Bulldogs, and Chris Grant and Scott Worst were my heroes.
I was a Geelong fan, and Billy Brownless was my favourite player.
Grew up on the Gold Coast when the Bears were down there, so went along to a few of their games, and I think just coming from Queensland, Roger Merritt was always someone I looked up to, and also back in the Bears days of Crow, Brad Hardy, because he had the red hair.
Well, most Collingwood supporters will hate this, but Carlton and Steve Kernahan and Silvani and all those kind of guys.
I barracked for Bombers, so childhood hero would have been Hurdy and Lloydie.
I was a Kanga supporter, and I proudly wore the number 4 for Mick Martin.
I went for Melbourne, and my hero was Jeff Farmer, little golf snake.
Growing up in Perth, went for West Coast, and Chris Mainwaring was my favourite player, and always got a card for him on my birthday. So yeah, he was my favourite player by a mile.
A massive Adelaide Crow supporter, and essentially anyone that pulled on a Crows jumper, but the likes of Bickley, Smart, Hart, Rashudo, Modra.
Yeah, I went for North Melbourne as a kid, and my hero was Glenn Archer, so we wore the number 11 on the back.
I barracked for St Kilda growing up, so first I liked Tony Lockett, but then realised I was going to be a bit smaller than that, so Nathan Burke and Robert Harvey were the two I sort of looked at.
Geelong Cats, growing up in Geelong, and Nathan Buckley was my childhood hero.
Barracked for Hawthorn as a kid, and I had number 23 on my jumper, so big Dermot Brereton.
Barracked for Essendon as a kid, and I loved watching Paul Salmon, and I lived a couple of doors up from Paul Hills, who played for the Bombers through the 90s and played in the 93 flag, so those two were my heroes.
Grew up barracking for Carlton, and my hero was Anthony Koutoufides, and hence why I took his number, or took that number at Essendon Football Club.
I barracked for the Adelaide Crows, and my favourite player was Tony Modra.
West Coast, my childhood hero probably Peter Matera.
The Adelaide Crows, and Andrew McLeod was my hero.
North Melbourne and Wayne Carey.
Barracked for Geelong, and Gary Hocking was probably my favourite player for the majority of my junior days.
I barracked for Collingwood when I was a kid, and my favourite player was Peter Dacos, and then went into Nathan Buckley.
I barracked for Glenelg in the SANFL and Stephen Kernahan.
I used to barrack for Collingwood, and Bucks was my hero. I used to wear number 5 on the back of my jumper.
I barracked for Melbourne, but favourite player was Chris Judd. I just remember going around to my best mate's house every weekend, and we'd specifically just get together to watch West Coast games, just to watch Juddy play, so it was always a good weekend.